What if I told you that the most successful Chinese foreign policy initiative of the past decade wasn't something China did at all? It was something America did to itself? Because while Donald Trump was withdrawing America from international agreements, abandoning allies, and putting America first, China was quietly doing the opposite. They were showing up. They were making commitments, they were being predictable, and countries around the world, even ones that preferred American partnership, started making a calculation that would have been unthinkable just 10 years ago. Maybe China is the more reliable superpower, not the more powerful one, not the more democratic one, not even the more desirable one, just the more reliable one. And in international relations, reliability might be the most valuable currency there is. Let's talk about how America First became China's greatest gift. The day the world changed. January 23, 2017. 3 days after taking office, President Trump signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a massive trade agreement that had taken years to negotiate and included 11 Pacific nations. The TPP wasn't just about trade, it was specifically designed as a counterweight to Chinese economic influence in Asia. It was meant to bind Pacific economies to American trade networks instead of Chinese ones. It represented the economic pillar of the Obama administration's Pivot to Asia strategy. One signature, gone. American allies in the TPP were stunned. Japan had spent enormous political capital getting the agreement through their parliament. Australia had restructured trade relationships. Vietnam had committed to labor reforms. Singapore had positioned itself as a TPP hub, and America just walked away. The message this sent wasn't just about trade policy. It was about American reliability. If the United States could spend years negotiating a flagship agreement, convince allies to make costly commitments based on that agreement, and then abandon it within days of a new administration, what did that say about American promises? China was watching, and they immediately understood the opportunity. Within months, China positioned itself as the champion of free trade and globalization. Xi Jinping gave a speech at Davos defending economic openness while Trump was imposing tariffs and threatening trade wars. The irony was extraordinary. Communist China defending free trade, democratic America embracing protectionism. But the symbolism mattered less than the practical reality. Countries that had been looking to America for economic leadership suddenly had to consider alternatives, and China was ready with those alternatives. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which China championed, filled the gap left by TPP Belt and Road projects accelerated. Chinese investment in Southeast Asia surged, not because countries loved China, but because America had created a vacuum and China was willing to fill it. The tributary system's modern advantage. Remember the tributary system that kept China at the center of the world for 2,000 years? It worked not because China was always the most powerful empire, though they often were. It worked because China was consistent. Dynasties changed, but the system persisted. Tributary states knew what to expect, send envoys, acknowledge Chinese cultural superiority, get trade access, political legitimacy, and protection in return. The rules didn't change every 4 years. They didn't change every dynasty. They remained stable for centuries. That consistency made the system attractive even to kingdoms that had won military victories against China. Vietnam, as we discussed, fought wars for independence, but then voluntarily rejoined the tributary system because participation was predictable and profitable. Modern China learned this lesson. While democratic systems produce policy whiplash with every election, China's one-party state can maintain consistent strategic direction across decades. Trump's America First didn't create this Chinese advantage, but it showcased it in the most dramatic way possible. Countries watching the TPP withdrawal, the Iran deal abandonment, the climate agreement exit, they all learned the same lesson. American partnership comes with expiration dates. Chinese partnership, for all its flaws, at least offers predictability. The NATO earthquake. Trump's treatment of NATO was perhaps the most consequential aspect of America First for global perceptions of American reliability. NATO is the most successful military alliance in human history. It kept the peace in Europe for 70 years. It prevented Soviet expansion during the Cold War. It provided the security umbrella that allowed European integration and prosperity. And it was built on a simple promise: an attack on one is an attack on all. Article 5. The Collective Defense Commitment. The only time it's ever been invoked was after 9/11, when European allies came to America's defense in Afghanistan. Trump repeatedly questioned NATO's value. He called it obsolete. He threatened to withdraw if European allies didn't increase defense spending. He openly wondered why America should defend Montenegro, a NATO member. The damage this did to American credibility is almost impossible to overstate. For 70 years, the American security guarantee was the foundation of the global order. Countries from Japan to South Korea to the Baltic states organized their entire defense postures around the assumption that American commitments were absolute, that in a crisis, America would show up. Trump raised doubt about that assumption, and once that doubt exists, it can never be completely removed. Even after Trump left office, even with Biden reaffirming NATO commitments, every ally now has to consider: what happens if Trump or someone like him wins again? What if American security guarantees only last 4 years at a time? China noticed. And more importantly, countries that had been relying on American security guarantees noticed. The gunpowder lesson, again. As we've discussed before, China learned from the gunpowder story. They invented world-changing military technology, but never used it for global conquest. Europeans took that technology and used it to colonize the world, including China. The lesson: invention without strategic deployment is worthless. Technology without geopolitical leverage is weakness. Modern China isn't making that mistake. They're not just building capabilities, they're deploying them strategically to exploit opportunities when they arise. America First was an opportunity, a massive, unexpected, gift-wrapped opportunity. China didn't create American unreliability, but they were ready to capitalize on it when it appeared. They had Belt and Road infrastructure ready to deploy. They had alternative financial systems prepared. They had diplomatic frameworks built. They had consistent talking points about multilateralism and win-win cooperation ready to deploy. When America stepped back from global leadership, China stepped forward, not because they had suddenly become more capable, but because they were prepared and consistent, while America was unpredictable and retreating. This is the gunpowder lesson mastered. When your adversary makes a strategic mistake, you need the infrastructure ready to exploit it. China had that infrastructure. America's America First gave them the opportunity to deploy it. The long-term damage. Here's what worries American strategists most. Even after Trump left office, even with Biden recommitting to allies and multilateral institutions, the damage persists. Because other countries learned a lesson from the Trump years. American commitments are reversible. American policy can change dramatically with one election. What one administration builds, the next can tear down. This knowledge fundamentally changes how countries calculate their interests. They can't bet everything on American partnership anymore. They have to hedge. They have to diversify. They have to build relationships with China, Russia, and other powers that might be less desirable but more predictable. And once that hedging begins, it's hard to reverse. Infrastructure projects get built, connecting to Chinese networks instead of American ones. Trade relationships develop that bypass dollar transactions. Technology standards get set using Chinese equipment instead of American alternatives. Every hedging decision creates path dependency. Every Chinese infrastructure project creates switching costs. Every Belt and Road commitment creates interests that resist changing course. America First didn't just damage American influence in the moment. It created conditions that will limit American influence for decades. The bottom line: Trump's America First made China the world's favorite superpower not because it made China better. It made China better by comparison. by withdrawing from agreements, abandoning allies, questioning commitments, and treating international partnerships as transactional rather than strategic, America handed China the greatest gift any adversary could ask for: contrast. Countries don't necessarily prefer Chinese partnership. They prefer predictable partnership. And when forced to choose between an American partner that might abandon them after the next election and a Chinese partner that maintains consistent engagement despite domestic political changes, many countries are choosing consistency. This is the tributary system rebuilt for the 21st century. Not through Chinese aggression or expansion, but through American retreat, creating a vacuum that China fills with patient, consistent, strategic engagement. The irony is brutal. America First was supposed to make America stronger by focusing on national interests rather than global leadership responsibilities. Instead, it made America weaker by demonstrating that American leadership is temporary and unreliable. China didn't defeat America in this competition. America defeated itself. China just capitalized on American self-sabotage with strategic discipline and long-term vision. And the lesson is clear for any country watching. Superpowers come and go based on their perceived reliability as much as their actual power. Rome fell not when it stopped being powerful, but when its commitment stopped being credible. Britain's empire collapsed not when its military was defeated, but when its promises were no longer trusted. America's greatest asset has always been the belief that American commitments are reliable, that American partnership outlasts political cycles, that American values are consistent even when policies adjust. America First damaged that asset, and China is the primary beneficiary of that damage. The world didn't suddenly love China, but it started calculating that in a chaotic, unpredictable world, even an authoritarian partner might be preferable to a democratic one that can't maintain consistent policy across presidential terms. That's the legacy of America First, not American strength, but American unreliability and Chinese opportunity. Click on the video on your screen now to keep watching. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and see you in the next one.